Tonight on Reporting Scotland, the Scottish and English FAs lobby FIFA to allow players to wear poppies for their match on Armistice Day. Losing their farms and their livelihoods over an error in the law, the tenant farmers trying to win compensation.
We're getting chucked out into the streets by the 28th of November. I've got a farm sale booked for the 24th of November and I'm going to be selling everyone down to my kitchen table.
Also in the programme, former miners in Scotland call for an investigation into confrontations between pickets and police during the miners' strike. Replaced by robots, a study that says 1 in 6 jobs in the public sector could be lost due to automation. And we're in Germany as Celtic prepare for tonight's Champions League match. Good evening. Is a poppy a symbol of remembrance or a political statement? That question is at the heart of a row between the Scottish and English football associations and the sports world governing body. FIFA has turned down a request from the FAs for players to be allowed to wear armbands featuring poppies during their World Cup qualifying match, which takes place on Armistice Day. Well, our political correspondent Andrew Kerr has been following the story and joins us from Edinburgh. Andrew.
Well, Jackie, I'm in the Garden of Remembrance in Princes Street Gardens in the capital. It just opened yesterday at this special time of year when we look back and we think of those who have given their lives so that we can enjoy the freedoms that we have today. Now, all around me, I'm surrounded by simple white wooden crosses adorned by a simple symbol, the poppy. And our footballers are wanting that chance to wear that symbol so that they too can have the opportunity to remember.
A simple ceremony, a reminder of sacrifice. People come to remember conflicts in the distant past and recent painful events too. The young men who gave their lives in battles like the Somme 100 years ago were just like these young men, pals who banded together. On the 11th of November, Armistice Day, Scotland will play England and the teams want to wear a poppy.
We have had a precedent on this back in 2011 and I think it's clear, and the point we're making is that this is not a political statement, this is a personal choice, this is a mark of respect for those who've lost their lives in the war.
And we will walk in his path.
It's thought FIFA, under a new regime, is more likely to be sensitive to this issue involving the oldest international match in the world. There's certainly political will for a change of heart.
Well, I think it's important to commemorate and remember the people who gave the ultimate sacrifice during the World Wars, and there's no better time to do that on Armistice Day on the 11th of November when England plays Scotland. So I would hope that FIFA would take the common sense and sensible approach here and allow both teams to wear poppies on their strips.
Look, I think FIFA have badly misjudged this. The fact that the game itself takes place on the 11th of the 11th, the fact that this is the year to commemorate the Great War of the First World War, shows how badly they've misjudged it. The poppy is not a political symbol.
This year's poppy appeal was launched by the gold medal winning Olympic cyclist Callum Skinner. People of all ages in Scotland will give this year to help veterans, and many will wear a poppy with pride. There's certainly a great deal of support to allow the descendants of those who fought an opportunity to remember as they meet in a different field of conflict.
Now, Jackie, as Stuart Regan of the SFA mentioned in that report, there is a precedent back in 2011 when England took on Spain at a friendly in Wembley. Now, Stuart Regan will be meeting the FIFA over the next couple of days, just pushing their case, hoping that there might be a change of heart, that the English and Scottish players might be able to wear those armbands on Armistice Day. Back to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Andrew Kerr there. Former Scottish miners say the UK government's decision to rule out a public inquiry into what became known as the Battle of Orgreave in Yorkshire during the miners' strike in 1984 makes them more determined. Campaigners here want an investigation into confrontations between striking miners and police north of the border. Lisa Summers reports.
In Newton Grange, the old colliery was declared the National Mining Museum in 1984. the same year as the most bitter of industrial disputes was unravelling.
About 150 pickets were faced by 100 police as the convoys of coal lorries left the open cast mine.
Striking miners clashed with police. One of the worst instances was at Bilston Glen, just outside Edinburgh. One of those arrested was Alec Bennett.
I appeared in court, was charged with breach of the peace and was fined £100. That was in December, the 20th of December 1984. I got my P45 in January, and I never worked for 3 years after the strike. I was blacklisted for 3 years.
Brandon Lewis.
In Westminster today, a junior minister faced an urgent question in the Commons 24 hours after his boss, Amber Rudd, ruled out an inquiry into the clashes at Orgreave.
Isn't it simply staggering that the Home Secretary has brushed away an inquiry as not necessary? And isn't it even more revealing that she wasn't prepared to come to this House today to justify her decision?
Some believe there is evidence that the Tory government instructed police to take a harsh approach in Scotland in the aftermath of the violence in Yorkshire.
There's a lot of questions about civil liberties and about the politics of the police and of the strike that points to an operation that goes far beyond individual cases of injustice and requires a collective response.
Hundreds of miners remain convicted of offences during the strike, more here in Scotland than any other part of the UK. And that's why campaigners say it's imperative that there's an investigation here into the conduct of police.
I don't know, I can understand the Tories taking the decision what they did, not to investigate the Tory government or the Thatcher government, but for the Scottish Parliament to take the same view as the Tories, I find that strange, and I don't know what the reason is.
The Scottish Government says it has no plans to conduct an inquiry into the police here. They say the Scottish Criminal Cases Review Board can look into cases of those who feel wrongly convicted. Lisa Summers, reporting Scotland, Newton Grange.
Defence Secretary Michael Fallon says he hopes to be able to make an announcement shortly on the review of military bases in Scotland. There are concerns for the future of sites such as the historic Fort George base near Inverness and the Kinloss barracks in Murray. The MOD is keen to close down and sell off dozens of its properties throughout the UK. A group of tenant farmers is taking the Scottish Government to court to try to win compensation for having to leave the farms they've been renting. The farmers say they're the victim of flawed legislation and that the government must take responsibility. Aileen Clark can tell us more.
Glenree Farm on the Isle of Arran. These 5,000 acres have been farmed by the Patterson family since 1996, after they signed a limited partnership lease with the local landlord to run it for 10 years. Legislation to try to strengthen the rights of tenant farmers in 2003 should have given them security for decades. But once that law was ruled to be incompetent, their hope of staying beyond their initial lease was not shared, they say, by the landlord. They've now been given notice to leave at the end of the month.
I hope that those who walk the halls of power overturn this wrong legislation, the flaw in the law, before this week's over. I hope they do provide a means for the farmers who are losing their farms to be able to continue to farm.
It's not so much the landlord, but the Scottish Government the family blame for their situation. Arriving at court in Edinburgh today, Ian and John Patterson argue that they are the victims of clumsy legislation and they must be compensated for the money they've invested in the farm over the years.
It was a flawed law. The Scottish Government did want to look, they were going to look sympathetically upon us, told us to put in our compensation claims, and ever since they've been put in, the roll of shutter doors have went up, so they have. And now we're obviously standing outside here having to take it to court.
The Pattersons are one of 7 tenant farmers from around Scotland taking the government to court, and they're supported by the Farmers' Union.
We'd simply ask government now, don't drag this through the courts, step in, pay the compensation that's due and allow all parties to move on from this terrible affair.
The Patterson family have accepted that they will have to leave this farm that they've built up over the years at the end of the month. But they're hoping that by highlighting their plight, other tenant farmers will be spared the same heartbreak. The Scottish Government won't comment on the court action for compensation, but say new legislation was brought in 2 years ago to replace the earlier flawed law. Years of uncertainty at Glenree, though, have taken their toll.
Sorry, yes, my husband. Yes. Jim has coped with it. He's been the head of the family and most of the worry has been in Jim's shoulders. But yes, it has had a terrible detrimental effect on my husband's health. So it has. All of us.
Aileen Clark, reporting Scotland on the Isle of Arran.
Could the controversial law aimed at tackling sectarianism in football be booted off the statute books? Well, tomorrow at Holyrood, opposition MSPs are launching a challenge to the government's laws around sectarian behaviour. So why is the Offensive Behaviour Act so offensive to so many? John McManus has been taking a look.
Celtic Park in September. As the Old Firm teams took to the pitch, in the home stands, this. Effigies draped in an orange sash and a Rangers scarf. Police have made arrests over that incident, as well as this, the trashing of the toilets by some Rangers fans. 4 years ago, the government's solution was the Offensive Behaviour at Football Act. But opposition parties say it was a blunt instrument which damaged free speech. On Wednesday, they'll debate whether it should be repealed. This Labour MSP says his recent consultation shows large support for that.
My view is that football fans going to the matches should be singing football songs. But one of the issues we've seen with this legislation is that the police are confused about what songs are illegal or would potentially cause public disorder. The judges are confused and the whole thing has just ended up a real mess.
One possible way forward is to make clubs legally responsible for fans' behaviour, strict liability.
Ultimately, it's the clubs who attract people in by dint of being the entertainment, if you like. But the fans have got a loyalty to the clubs, and if they realise that the clubs were going to be punished severely, could be punished severely, then it might well be that would be the thing, the trigger that would make them change their behaviours.
The legislation's always aroused strong feelings amongst fans. One blogger says it's about free speech.
No other part of society do I have the right to be offended. I mean, if you take it to its logical conclusion, I might be offended by your tie. Doesn't mean I have the right to then call a police officer and get you lifted and taken away because I find your choice of colour of tie and clashes with your suit offensive. I mean, it's just a nonsense when you take it to its nth degree.
Many football fans agree that there is a problem with sectarianism in some parts of football, but they're also concerned about limits on their free speech, something they say this legislation has made worse. And that's something that opposition politicians will be talking about tomorrow in the Holyrood debate. John McManus, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
A Labour MP who is on trial for allegedly kicking a Yes campaigner on the day of the independence referendum has been cleared of abusive behaviour. St Helens South and Whiston MP Marie Rimmer faced 2 charges following an incident outside Shettleston Community Centre in September 2014. In Glasgow Sheriff Court, the 69-year-old was found not guilty of behaving in a threatening or abusive manner. Ms Rimmer denies the other charge that she assaulted a woman by kicking her. The trial continues. The Chief Executive of the Scottish SPCA is to leave the animal welfare charity with immediate effect. Stuart Early had faced criticism over his pay packet of more than £200,000 a year. Staff were informed earlier today that the charity's board had accepted Mr Early's resignation. You're watching BBC Reporting Scotland. It's 17 minutes to 7. A reminder now of tonight's top story. The Scottish and English FAs lobby FIFA to be allowed to wear poppies on their shirts for their match on Armistice Day. And still to come, the runner Laura Muir says that reports of drugs test failings at the Rio Games puts a question mark over some performances. Almost 90,000 people working for Scotland's public services could be replaced by a machine within the next 15 years, according to an expert report. The study by Deloitte says powerful computers will take the place of people who carry out routine jobs. Well, we haven't got to our business correspondent David Henderson yet because he's here in person and he can tell us more.
Yes, Jackie, they call this the rise of the machines controlled by computers which have become ever more sophisticated. That allows them to take on tasks normally done by people. And the consultants Deloitte say the long-term impact could be huge. By 2030, they warn that automation could replace 1 out of every 6 jobs across Scotland's public sector. Almost every line of work will be affected, but the study says it could make our public services more productive and reduce the cost to the taxpayer.
Meet the new workers helping to run a Scottish hospital. Robots like these ones clean floors, pack pills and deliver supplies to the wards. They never tire, rarely need a break and could replace thousands of humans.
We estimate that 1 in 6 or 88,000 jobs in the public sector in Scotland could be automated by the year 2030. Now, that's not going to happen overnight, but over time people's roles will change so that there'll be a large number of mainly administrative roles that we simply won't need anymore.
Technology's already changed our public services. Bin collections like this are a thing of the past. Now, councils rely on fewer people and better machines. Railways too have been transformed, with signs like these replaced by the digital revolution. In healthcare, new systems bring new benefits. Patients in remote areas can now use a video link to avoid a long journey to hospital.
I spoke to a couple in Skye last month, and that journey to come to Regmore Hospital would have taken them 2.5 hours one way, and that's a whole day to come and spend actually with 15 to 20 minutes in an outpatient clinic. So that they think it's fantastic, and it makes a real difference to their quality of life.
The rise of the machines is being felt right across the economy and not just by the public sector, bringing huge change at work and at home. But it may take time to get the technology right. So teething problems there for that robot, and that sort of experience has prompted union leaders to appeal for caution. They say technology can only do so much, and they point to big costly failures where computer systems were brought in for the NHS and Police Scotland. But it's unlikely they can halt this march towards automation as our public services look for ways to make your money go further. Jackie.
Thank you, David. And now look at other stories from across the country. A 2-year-old boy is in a critical condition after falling from a 4th-floor window in the Torry area of Aberdeen yesterday afternoon. The toddler was initially taken to hospital in Aberdeen before being transferred to Glasgow. Police say their inquiries are at an early stage, but it's not thought to be a criminal act. The 17,000-tonne oil rig which ran aground on the Western Isles in August has finally arrived off Turkey, where it's to be scrapped. The Transocean winner came ashore near Carloway on Lewis in a storm while being towed to the Mediterranean. It was later refloated and put on board a heavy lift ship. An 8-year-old boy was taken to hospital after a collision between a double-decker bus and an industrial vehicle on the south side of Glasgow this morning. He was treated by paramedics and taken to hospital, but his injuries are not thought to be serious. The 43-year-old bus driver has been reported to the Procurator Fiscal in connection with alleged road traffic offences. A First World War sculpture has been unveiled in Glasgow's George Square as part of the Remembrance commemorations. The 23-foot statue, called Every Man Remembered, is based on the unknown soldier and stands on a block of limestone from the Somme area of France. A 67-year-old from Orkney has been named Britain's hardest working man at the Pride of Britain Awards. Billy Muir from North Ronaldsay holds down more than 20 jobs on the small island, which has a population of fewer than 50. His roles include lighthouse keeper, firefighter, shepherd and airport worker. He also has several voluntary roles within the community. Football now, and despite injuries to several key players, Celtic have made just one change for tonight's Champions League match in Germany. Brendan Rodgers' side take on Borussia Mönchengladbach, needing a win to have any chance of progressing in the tournament. The manager believes they can, but as Chris McLaughlin reports, the fans who've travelled don't share his optimism.
A pretty peaceful morning in Mönchengladbach, a lazy start to the day which didn't last long. They are indeed, and in their thousands, many without tickets, but all with a belief in a man who's given them some European hope.
We want to come here and the only thing we're concentrating on is giving it everything in the game. There's no doubt that we can win here. You know, if we perform to the level that we know we can, then of course it's a